I have finally gone hands-on with Frostpunk 2, the brutally hard, often dark and gruesome survival city builder created by the ambitious team at 11-Bit Studios. If you're a veteran of the first game, prepare for a ton of changes, and if you're new to the gritty reality of Frostpunk, then strap in because this ain't your normal sequel. My name is Codiak, this is Legacy Gaming, and let's dive in to Frostpunk 2. To level set with you all, I love Frostpunk. It's one of those games that has truly stuck with me through my years of gaming and still stands up as one of the most ambitious and innovative games within its genre. With that said, I have incredibly high hopes for Frostpunk 2, but after going hands-on with the game's preview version of Utopia Builder, the game's pseudo-free build mode, I realized quickly that Frostpunk 2 is not going to be a 1.5 version of the game, but a true sequel in every sense of the word. You notice this almost immediately with the game's building, which is strikingly different than its predecessor. For starters, you're not placing individual structures like you did in the first game. Instead, you're using a skill called Frostbreak to clear parts of the frozen world around your generator, revealing resources, and then creating districts on top of those resources to harvest them. I'll admit this did not click immediately, and I spent a good deal of time trying to find that one building that would net me that one resource, but that's just not how this game works. Depending on the size of your district and the resources under your district will determine the output, whether that be for coal, food, or materials. Housing also works the same way. Instead of placing individual shelters like you did in the first game, you'll create a housing district. You can then expand it to accommodate more people, and then through laws and research, increase the effectiveness of the housing. Research, much like the first game, drives innovation, but this time around, you're not simply trying to survive. No, Frostpunk 2 adds an entire new dynamic to the game in way of factions. Our preview started with just two, the Foragers and the Machinists, and they both have very different views of how to move the city forward. Each decision you make, from the laws you choose to the research you pursue, not only changes the way your society operates, but how these factions view you as a leader. The goal is perfect harmony, managing your resources and your reputation, and that is at the very center of the gameplay experience. Factions play a huge role in everything you do within the game, and as your playthrough progresses, new factions, or voices as they're called, will rise and present new challenges and opportunities. These new factions have more radical views of how society should govern, and as you continue to grow and expand, you'll realize that that perfect harmony I mentioned before is almost impossible to maintain. That's what 11-Bit managed to do so well with Frostpunk, constantly making you feel like you're on the edge of chaos. And while it's too early to say if that's the case with Frostpunk 2, things certainly appear to be organized in a similar way, albeit focused on a different set of systems. One of the most notable changes to Frostpunk 2 is the laws system. At its core, things feel familiar. You make decisions about different aspects of your society, and those decisions will change productivity, effectiveness, or other variables of your settlement. But unlike the first game, laws are also tied to the various factions, and what laws you choose to pass will influence your relationship with those factions involved. What's also different is that laws can't just be arbitrarily enacted. They have to pass with a majority vote from the council, which is made up of 100 citizens from your settlement across the various factions. Every time you consider a vote on a new law, you'll have to weigh the options, whether to try and pass the law straight up or negotiate with the various factions to try and lock in the required votes without question. Negotiating means compromise, and if you rely on a faction to help secure votes, you also need to give them something in return, whether that be funding for a future project, the ability to determine the agenda for the next council session, or something else. Laws can be changed, and throughout my various playthroughs, a power struggle to influence those laws developed. It all comes back to balance, and while it seems a bit convoluted at this point, after just 2 or 3 runs, it became incredibly easy to navigate the various systems. Research works in a similar way in that factions are tied to your endeavors. What you choose to pursue will not only open up new advancements that improve your settlement, but will align with certain factions. If you choose a research that aligns with a faction, they'll see you more favorably, while the remaining factions won't. Unlike laws, research can't be changed, so these decisions felt more permanent and meaningful. At this point, you might realize that Frostpunk 2 challenges you to think on a more macro level than the original game. You're setting laws that dictate thousands of people, not hundreds, and the relationships you're nurturing, or not, make you feel like you're in charge of a fledgling government, not a group of survivors hanging on for dear life. This is ultimately going to be the sticking point for many players, and while the preview only gave us a glimpse at the totality of the game's systems, it's clear that Frostpunk 2 challenges the players to think big picture. Relationship management is clearly central to the game, but you can't forget about all the things that made the original Frostpunk so great, and a lot of those systems are back in full force. Yes, you'll be fighting the elements, and at times storms will roll in, and you'll have to contend with all of the things you might remember from that first game, namely heat. There's even a great pop-up that lets you know that the snow is coming, and if that doesn't trigger some sort of PTSD, well then I don't know what will. Heat stamps, which act as your main spending resource in the game, will dictate pretty much everything about how you expand your settlement. You can spend them to appease factions or to frostbreak new sections of the map, or even build unique structures, and without a healthy supply, your chances of survival are bleak. Because we were capped at 300 in-game weeks, we really didn't have a great chance to see this play out, but it was clear heat stamps and eventually cores are going to be two of the most vital resources in the game, on top of what you need to survive: fuel for your generator, food, materials, and goods to keep your people happy. It's simply impossible to evaluate the systems at this point because we're just seeing a slice of the game, so keep that in mind as we move forward. Just like the original game, the action extends beyond your settlement, and once you establish a logistics district, you can send out expeditions to scout the surrounding areas of the world. Again, we saw the first layer of this system, just enough to give us an idea for how it will function in the final game, but it feels remarkably similar to the first game. Now, I could beat you over the head with every nuance based on my experience during my hours playing the preview. We could walk through every menu and tooltip, but instead, I'd rather share a few overall thoughts on my experience and how the game felt, because at this point, I think that's more valuable. From the onset, it was clear that Frostpunk 2 is a different game from the original title. It's less intimate in a way, and even though you're still influencing the fate of individuals within your settlement, because you're dealing with this at a more macro level, it feels a bit sterile. I didn't have that gut-churning feeling making crucial decisions this time around, and maybe that's because I'm used to the doom and gloom of Frostpunk, or it could be because there's less of that personal connection that made the first game so great. There are moments where personal stories come to light, but I didn't feel that in the preview. On the city building aspect of the game, things are incredibly different. It's very strange building districts and forgoing traditional one building at a time approaches that almost every other city builder employs. Watching entire parts of your city appear and disappear as you construct and demolish things is odd, but again, we just haven't seen enough to know how this plays out long term. There's something so satisfying about placing down singular buildings and reaping the benefits of it almost immediately, but that might also be true once we have access to more content within Frostpunk 2. It's just too early to say. I like that within districts, unique buildings offer you different ways to influence productivity, but I want to feel the effects of everything I put down, and that's what I'm afraid of losing with the district system. All that said though, it's certainly a different and ambitious approach, one I think will be interesting to check out once the full game is available. Finally, I want to touch once again on factions and the progression system, because this is clearly where the most development has occurred. It's very cool to see your settlement fracture into these splinter groups, and that's going to be one of the hallmarks of the game. I know it. You can see how intense this is going to eventually play out. Piss off one faction and they protest shutting down food operations, which causes your entire city to spiral out of control. Once the trust is gone, it's almost impossible to get it back, and that means maintaining those critical relationships. Once we have the full array of research and laws, this is what I am most excited to explore, because I believe this is where 11-bit has hid a majority of the surprises and meaningful moments that will end up defining the game. Frostpunk 2 is slated for a July 25th release date, so we've got a little ways to wait. This was just a first look at a game, and I honestly cannot wait to explore it in its entirety. We just didn't see enough with this preview. I love pretty much everything 11-bit pumps out, but the team is taking some chances here with new and reworked systems that veterans of the first game might not like. That's just the reality of the situation. There's no one that can say with authority if the game is good or bad just yet. There's just not enough out there to explore, but all signs point to another incredibly dark and deep survival city building experience. As always, if you like our content and you want more videos like this in your feed, do me a solid, hit that thumbs up and consider subscribing. We'll be checking out Frostpunk 2 come release time, so keep it right here and never miss a thing. My name is Kodiak, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching and play on.